I was asking you the other day, John, when we were on the phone with Aaron and Corey, is there going to be anybody else attending this weekend who is old enough to have been to the 1972 convention in San Diego? Besides you, probably. You were probably 12.
I wish. I don't think Norm will be on. I don't think Steve Clark will be on, or Larry. The only one who might be on would be Marvin Moss. He actually goes all the way back to the 60.
60, yeah, 66, I think, was his first one, wasn't it? Was 60. He earlier? 60. Wow.
60. Deauville Hotel.
Yeah, well, you know, I got to tell you, I see Marvin and Marilyn, all three of their kids live out here in California. Yep. And all three of their kids are still unmarried, which drives Marilyn batshit crazy, of course. And so, but Marilyn has now comes out for 3 months, usually about 3 months, had been coming out 3 months every summer to stay with Michael, their youngest, who lives not very far from here. So she'd come out for 3 months and camp out, and then terrorize my wife, making her go out to dinner all the time and that sort of stuff. And Marvin would come out a couple times. So we see, up until COVID-19 happened, we would see Marvin and Marilyn 2 or 3 times a year. Yeah. And so, you know, they would always come out. We always found some stuff to do. If Marv had work to do, I'd plant him in my office and give him the Wi-Fi code, and he'd sit there with his laptop and work from my office. And now he's got this idea that he wants to practice some law out here. And, hey, can I still have that on? Get out of here. You're not going to pay rent. You're going to pay rent, boy, if you stay with me. So, yeah, so I see Marvin and Marilyn quite a bit. And, you know, for those of you who haven't seen him, he was at the last in-person. He was there in 18. And I'm telling you, he's like 84, 85. He looks great. He just looks great. He's just hanging in there, doing his thing. But so Homer's not going to be on this either. He would have been there in 72. But so it feels kind of lonely here with no one else here except John, who has a youthful memory, who can remember all of this stuff. Mm-hmm. So no, it was a lot of fun. You know, one of the things, and I'll do probably some more of this tomorrow night because I'm doing a similar session tomorrow night. We got to talking about the history, and I shared with Aaron and Corey the fact that the first, after Ray Judice, of course, wrote the history from the beginning of all time until he stopped, whenever he stopped. And John, you may know more on this than I do, because there was a lag period in there where I didn't see, actually, I'm not sure anyone was really writing on the history. Ray may have been adding to it as time went on, even though he had become international justice and all of that from 74 to 76. And but the first board member who I know really took pen to paper on this and really took it seriously was Rick Pearson, when he was the historian. And a little bit of background for everybody. And as for those of you youngsters here who don't remember the days when we had named offices, international historian was one of the board positions. Rick took it to heart, as only Pearson did with everything he did. He really, he just would get into something, and he wouldn't, dog with a bone, he wouldn't let go of it. So he wrote the history from basically, I think, from where, and correct me if I'm wrong, John, I think he rewrote the history from the time whenever Ray stopped up until the time that he was the historian. And then the following year, I became historian right after him. So I then got in and started writing the history. One of the things I did was I rewrote a lot of Rick's history, not to change the content, but I tried to make it more stylistically the way Ray Judice had written the first 60-some years. So I took and kind of copied Ray's style of writing and tried to match what I wrote to that so that it all looked like it was written by one person. I don't know who else contributed, John, to the history, because you would have been coming along in that time period. I don't know who else wrote on it until
Ron. At least he claimed to have done some updating, Ron Winter, of the history as well.
Ray did two versions. The last one ended in 2002. And yeah,
You get it from me?
the history continues. Yeah, that's the one. That's the second version.
yes,
After that, the only attempt that I'm aware of is Ron reached out to all of the past IJs and asked us to each write a piece that would cover our biennium as IJ. I know I did. I don't know how many other people did.
yeah.
From what Juan's told me, he actually kind of helped Ray ghostwrite. So part of that update Ray did through 2002.
Yeah. During when I was IJ, for those who don't know it also, Ray actually got back involved from 1998 to 2000, and he actually did some more editing and wrote some more work on it, which really became the impetus for this piece getting published. Without the history continues being published, and so he finished doing that. He that was his last hurrah on the history. And if you look into the book, we showed, even with that book, even though others had contributed, we showed Ray Judice as the author of the history. That covered basically the first 100 years of the fraternity.
Right.
So it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun, and Ray has. Those of you who knew Ray Judice, who knew Ray Judice, you knew he was a dedicated P.A.D. through and through. He had, he everything he did was so dedicated to everything fraternity, right down to designing the medallions, to the carving on the big ceremonial gavel and everything else. I mean, Ray was he was really into that stuff. So anyway, but that's a little bit of background on the history, and so that's good to know. Ron had done some of the work on it. BJ, had you written any of the history yourself? Had you gotten involved in it once you got involved, or what did you do on it?
In terms of the official history, no, although we flirted with the idea of doing an update a little bit between when Ron Winter was International Justice. He had talked to us about doing it, and we kind of started doing some preliminary work, but then we got tied up in governing docs issues, as sometimes happens in File Fidelta, and kind of let it fall by the wayside. But I know John McKell, our current International Justice, has talked to me about taking up that project again to update it during this biennium. Of course, my dream is to start over from scratch and tell the story in my own voice, and then we'll have two official histories, two histories out there.
Well, I suggested to the group
competing histories.
Yeah.
Well, I suggested to the group the other day when we had our pre-call that we could always have a version of drunk history.
That would probably be amazing. I love that.
And boy, could we have a lot of fun with some of that stuff.
Drunk history. Oh, I love that.
Yeah, I know in a little bit I'll be talking about sort of the birth of File Fidelta, doing a presentation, and I know there's a lot of things that Ray doesn't cover in his history, and I would just like to have sort of an opportunity to contribute some more of that story than's generally known and recorded now. So John, when I brought that up with John McKell, he said, "That's great, but can you just update Ray's this biennium?"
Hey, what John doesn't know won't hurt him.
We could shoot Ray, Well, it was a lot of fun, and there was a lot of really cool stuff that was happening during that time period. I met Ray in 1972, and I had known Sandy Ray before that because of LA Alumni Chapter. I'd done some stuff with LA Alumni Chapter and all of that. And but I really, I got my first dose in '72. That was my first convention, and it was such a great experience because there were just so many people there that were just really almost famous, high-level people who were at that convention, and I was somewhat awestruck. I was so awestruck I had to go sit in the jacuzzi and start drinking with Ray Giudice to settle me down from the talent I was surrounded by at that conference. And of course we'll tell. I guess we'll tell that. I think we should save Sunrise chapter for later, John. Or what do you think?
When we start talking about the dead people.
Yeah.
Certainly, we've already started.
Well, you know what? The trouble is that we beat the odds on that. We both lived through it. So I mean, what can I say? So, yeah, no, it was really, really a lot of fun. That convention was at the Town and Country Hotel in San Diego, and I think that hotel is still there. I haven't been back there for a while. Is it still there, Aaron?
To my knowledge, yes. Hotel Circle hasn't really changed much since the 70s.
Yeah, that's probably true. That's probably true. But that was my first convention, and like everyone who's gone to their first convention, that's probably the one we all remember. We'll always remember our first convention. Now, there's an exception on this, and that would be John, because he's been to all the other conventions for everyone else. So everyone's like a first convention for him, and he remembers them all. So, it really kind of opened my mind to what the fraternity was all about. And I had joined that year. I was initiated on a Friday, elected chapter justice the following Monday. I served 1 year as chapter justice, and the next year, which was my last year, I promptly ran for chapter clerk. And everyone says, "You've already been chapter justice. What are you running for clerk for?" I says, "Because the clerk's the most important officer in the chapter. That's the person who keeps everything together for everybody and makes sure everyone keeps the records and all that stuff." So I think when I attended 72, John, I was still chapter justice, because that's the year I was elected. I became clerk after that, the following year. So that was really a lot of fun. That was a lot of fun, and it started me off on 30 years. I didn't realize until I was talking with Aaron recently that I had forgotten I had been an officer for 30 consecutive years, which of course damn near ruined my marriage, among other things. So I mean, there's another. I said, in the interest of marital harmony, when I retired as IJ, I said to my wife, "No mas, that's it. I'm retired. I'm not doing anything more. Just let me finish this job, and then I'll come back." But that was it was quite an interesting experience. So John, you followed me as DJ, because I was DJ from 74 to 78. Who was DJ after you? Was Shelley DJ after you?
No, Alexandra.
Alexandra after you, because Shelley did not serve as DJ, if I recall.
She dodged that bullet.
She dodged that bullet. Oh.
I loved being a district justice, and thanks to you, John, I got to do it twice. I almost said I had to do it twice. I got to do it twice.
Thank you for your service, brother.
Yep.
And although it had many of its own frustrations, I really enjoyed doing it. So thank you for that opportunity the second time, John.
In other words, be careful what you ask for. You might just get it.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's
what I always tell people when they bring up ideas. I said, the great thing about working for a volunteer organization is we'll not only take your ideas, we'll enlist you to bring them to fulfillment.
Pretty much how it works.
Yep.
Hey, does anybody? I got a question here. You just finished the pre-law conference, and has anybody been assigned the responsibility to talk about pre-law and how it started and all that stuff? Or
Oh, yeah, that-
Aaron, what do you,
We did that, but I specifically said that you would have an addition to add to it.
can I add my addition on pre-law? Because there's a part of the story I think most people don't know. Because
That's what we were expecting.
yeah, we had, well, the nice thing about it is the only other person who knew anything about this is now respectfully deceased, and there'll be no one to contradict me at this point. But he would have agreed with me completely. And we had Aaron and Corey and I had this conversation, and I don't know how it started. You were talking about pre-law and the start of pre-law and all that stuff, and I said, how pre-law really got started. There's a story behind pre-law that most people don't know. John may know it, but in this group, no one else would know this. Pre-law in 1976 at the convention in Kansas City, I was assigned to be on a committee called it was something like New Programs and Ideas. It was like kind of a think tank committee in 1976. And at the time, there was a very young board member who happens to be, from my recollection, the only board member who was ever elected as a student, and that was Jack Miller. He was elected in Toronto in 1974 as a student. And John, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think any other student's ever been elected to the P.A.D.
Well,
board.
you have to go way back, but there
Way back.
were students when we were much younger, but not any for a couple of years.
Not in recent years. So Jack is sort of like the assistant chair of this committee we were put on in Kansas City, and we spent the first half of the day floundering about, and everybody was talking about all kinds of different ideas. Nothing was going anywhere. So Jack and I go to lunch. We went to a place called Houlihan's in Kansas City, and we're sitting at Houlihan's in Kansas City, and we're talking. And he said, there's got to be something new and different people can think about. So we talked back and forth, and then I said, what if we could create what if we could find a way to build a structure so we can reach down into colleges and universities, for example, and attract people to go to law school and attract people to become members of the fraternity before they get to law school. And we both got really excited. We got to talking about having like a feeder organization. That was the idea. It was a feeder organization to do this. And so we talked about it more. We spent the whole lunch very excited about this. And we said, this dog could hunt. We could actually create there's a lot of people that are going to colleges in those days who are thinking about going to law school, and many of whom would go to law school. And what if we could create some sort of an organization that would attract those people to come to law school and then join the fraternity? So we got very excited. We made some notes on this stuff. We take it back to the committee, and the committee then says, present it to the convention. So Jack and I get together, and we tooled it all up, and we made this outline presentation, and we presented to the convention floor this idea of forming a collegiate level type organization that would be a feeder group for the fraternity. Well, suffice it to say, we were absolutely laughed at, and we were essentially booed off the floor of the convention. No one liked it. They thought that was the dumbest idea that anyone has ever come up with, and we were just sent home with our tail between our legs. Well, as some of you know, who was elected to become International Justice that year was Don Hudson. And so at the very next convention in 1978 in Cleveland, there was a committee called Auxiliary Organizations Development Committee. And a guy named Frank McCown, if I recall, was made the chairman of that committee. John's nodding, am I right? He was made the chairman of that committee. That committee took this idea and ran with it, and it literally became pre-law. The following biennium, pre-law was launched, and the whole bit. Up until the time poor Jack passed away a few years ago, every time we would get together, and those of you who knew Jack, everyone loved Jack Miller. he says, doesn't it just piss you off that we thought of this idea and we got no credit for it for the next 25 years? I says, well, welcome to the world of bureaucracy. That's the way that it is. So, John, I can't tell you how many times Jack Miller would come over and somebody would be talking about pre-law. He remembered it all the way through the years he was with us. He'd come over and he'd elbow me and he says, God damn it, we thought of that idea and no one gave us any credit for it. I says, well, it is what it is.
Joe, if it makes you feel any better, if I recall correctly, story chapter at DePaul in an article in the P.A.D. Quarterly in about 1916 proposed pre-law chapters, and they didn't get much better acceptance than you did.
Yeah, well, that's good. I'm glad that someone else thought of the idea too. That it was an interesting idea at the time, and that's really how that's the backstory to pre-law. Of course, Jack and I were having beers at Houlihan's, so suffice it to say, neither of us were studious enough to go back and figure out what story chapter had been doing the equivalent of about 70 years earlier, so 60 years earlier. But it's good to know. That's good to know.
So I have a question. So it wasn't envisioned with your feet in the pool drinking a bottle of scotch?
What's that?
So it wasn't come up with as part of...
No, Aaron, that was a different convention. That was 72. That's where I got my baptism by fire with Ray Giudice.
And I'm sure Joe can't share all the things that came to him while sitting in the jacuzzi with scotch.
Well, many of you know the story of the Sunrise chapter, the term of which was coined by, I think, Fred Whitecamp. I think Fred came up with the term. Either Fred or one of the others they'd come up with that term, But for those of you who do, how many of you, raise a hand if you don't know the story of the pre-law chapter? Well, there's a couple of you there. Jay Ross is, you don't know that. Jay, do you know the story? Oh, you don't know the story of Chris. In 1972, of course, this is my first convention. I was an aficionado of a very cheap kind of scotch called J&B Scotch. And I get to this convention, and the very first night, I had a bottle of J&B. I had my bucket of ice from my hotel room, and I go down to the jacuzzi. And I go sit in the jacuzzi, and with my bucket of ice and my bottle of scotch, I'm having scotches on the rocks. And down comes this guy who's a big shot in the fraternity, who I didn't know at all, but I'd seen him around, and I knew he was some sort of a big shot because he was involved in everything going on. His name was Ray Giudice. And he shows up at the jacuzzi with a bottle of J&B Scotch and his bucket of ice. And I said, okay, this is going to be an interesting get-together here. So I'm with a big shot who drinks the same cheap shit that I do, so we're going to be okay. So we start drinking, and we start talking, and we got to know each other. And we continued to drink, and we drank all night. We talked and drank about everything under the sun. We talked. Literally, all of a sudden, the sun was coming up, and he says, oh, shit, we got to get ready and go to work. So we get out of the jacuzzi, we go in, clean up, go back, and we work at the convention all day. And we did that the first night, and probably not too many people knew about it. But the second night, I go back down to the jacuzzi again with another bottle of J&B Scotch that I had purchased. And who's down there but Ray Giudice with his other bottle and a bucket of ice. And I went, okay, so away we go. We do it a second night in a row. And I think the third night it probably caught up with us, because I don't recall doing it all night the third night. But within a couple of days, Fred Whitecamp they'd put the word out that we had become the Sunrise chapter. They renamed us the Sunrise chapter of Phi Alpha Delta. And at that point, Ray and I decided that we needed to have a formal fraternal organization if we're going to be a chapter, we had to have some rules and we had to have some bylaws and all that kind of stuff. Because, you know, we're keeping with the tradition. And the interesting thing about the Sunrise chapter was that we never had any other new members of it. Because a lot of people, the rules were as follows. You had to sit in a body of water all night. You had to drink a fifth of your favorite brown whiskey. You had to toast the rising of the sun. You had to clean up and go to work. And here's the hard part. You had to function effectively all the next day. And so those were the rules. So a lot of people could sit in a body of water all night. A lot of people could drink a bottle of booze. A lot of people can get up and try to go to work. But the hard part was functioning effectively the next day. Well, over the course of the years, as luck would have it, no one else qualified to be in the Sunrise chapter. Besides, we had a rule that there had to be a unanimous vote to elect somebody to membership in the Sunrise chapter. And over the course of the next 25 years, Ray and I could never agree on anything, so we could never get a majority vote on anything, because there's only two of us. So we're living proof of the fact you should always have an odd number of board members. So anyway, along we went, and I think out of frustration, the good old boys club, the GOBers, were formed a number of years later in retaliation to that. So and I actually have somewhere in my pin collection over there, I think I have my old Sunrise, but Ray actually designed a pin for the Sunrise chapter too. That was always the big joke with the Sunrise chapter. But boy, I love that guy. He was everyone loved Ray Judice, but and you know, the guy was everybody's favorite person. The students loved him from year to year and year to year. I mean, he never got too old for the students. You know, he always loved hanging out and spending time with us all and all that stuff. So that's the story of the Sunrise chapter, Aaron, and I'm not denying any of it if you ever challenge me in the future.
Of course not. Of course not.
All right, now we have a mission for 2022 now.
Well, thanks for telling
That's
us
right.
that, Joe. I've heard like little bits and snippets about it, but I've never actually heard the story from you or Ray and completely.
Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, before the other day, all I had heard were the details about you could never get a majority vote to admit anybody else.
that was the big joke. That was the big joke. You could never get a majority vote on anything because we couldn't agree on anything. And we took pride in the fact that we didn't agree on anything too. So it preserved the mystique and the whole story behind it. But I don't know.
And that was good. You disagreed on things, but yeah, didn't have to. There was still civility and professionalism there.
Oh yeah. We had a lot of fun with Ray. Hey, John, over the years.
Is it just me, or does Jay Ross look like he's on an episode of Cops?
You're just missing the music.
Waiting for the flashing lights behind him.
Or I will not talk to the police.
Yeah, well, wait a minute. I see two Jay Ross things here. Is one of you the phone, Jay, and the other one's your illegal phone on while you're driving?
I think I left my laptop on at home.
Yeah. Too bad he doesn't tell his clients not to talk to the police.
That's my alibi. You're all my alibi.
Let's see you serve the subpoena 1,000 miles south.
Yeah.
I was at my laptop in my house. That's right.
I'm just watching the scenic, darkened streets of New Jersey go by as down in the window there.
New Jersey highway
think we're losing him.
Uh-oh.
He muted his phone so we won't hear if there's a loud crash.
Watch out for deer.
I'm at an intersection.
So Joe, is there other stuff you wanted to share before I kick in my presentation, or I know you've had some time to think about stories you want to tell.
Well, I'm going to be on again tomorrow night for an hour and a half too. But since we were talking about Ray Judice, I do remember the time, and John may remember the time when they were having the board meeting in Los Angeles, and Ray had uncharacteristically had too much to drink one night, and he fell asleep, went back to whatever room, whatever the parlor room, whatever it was where they were, and he laid down on the couch and he promptly fell asleep. And he is awakened. I actually told the story during my eulogy of Ray when at the convention. You may remember this. Yep. But he is awakened by this deep sounding voice that was muffling and all that stuff. He just heard some sounds like that. And he opens one eye and the room is dark. And there's a couple of candles that are lit on the coffee table. And there's 3 figures, all shrouded in black. And they were quietly reciting the ritual of the dead over Ray's body where he was passed out. And honest to God, he opened one eye and he looked around, and because it was dark and there's just a couple of candles there, he couldn't see who they were. It was Fred, Hudson, and Frank McCown, who had put their robes on and lit the candles. They're doing the ritual for a deceased brother, and Ray opened one eye and he said, "Oh shit, it's happened. I died." He opened one, he thought he had really died, and he was in heaven, and he didn't know who they were at the time. That was the ritual of the deceased brother was recited over Ray's drunk body at the board meeting in Los Angeles that year. So that's the only story I will tell you that I can remember at this point. There'll probably be a couple of others, but